That's all they do.
I mean, it's more of MLB and
Yeah, it's actually up to the mountain.
it's up to the umpires. There are actually rules that say certain distance pass.
Yeah.
So
But there's like,
well, it's interesting. The 6 inning and it's just scored 3.
I mean,
came out the sun.
Last night, yeah, I was enjoying it later, like you said,
Yeah.
resume.
there's like one owner which is like very, very stubborn.
It's calling
Yeah.
right away.
Sorry. At one point, it looked like, as I had looked up and rewind, I thought the tarp was being blown up by the wind, but it wasn't. It was actually the grounds were actually blowing it back. This big on Dallas Sports, they had this double box. Okay. So the live hit was in the small box, and then when you play like the big,
Oh, I see, yeah.
on a big one, you know, the last.
I just know that Cincinnati takes like a lot more seriously.
Yeah. So does the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, NFL and I think MLS have personal policies.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was funny how much the foreign teams not playing. Because it wasn't like during the Club World Cup.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't like the Club World Cup. But guess what? You're not going to here. These are rules.
Pretty in the background. Yeah, pretty. Yeah, that was one thing. My Florida stations over there. But they said this out early. But if there was lighting. She's very unheard and just said, can you drive over? Just try not to drive over the power. Yeah, there's an alligator in the water.
It was 110 miles. I don't know, we already first of all,
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for coming in. It's important for me to continue our commitment to updating the public about our public safety plan, the interventions that we put in place, the results of those interventions, and also new interventions that the public can expect coming this weekend. As you all know, we have been doing these press engagements roughly every 2 weeks since the beginning of the summer. This is our opportunity to fully brief the public and the media about the extraordinary public safety interventions that we have been deploying all summer long, and also how we move forward in the future. I want to start by making it very clear that violent crime has no place in the city of Cincinnati, anywhere, whether it's downtown, OTR, urban core, or any of the rest of our 52 neighborhoods. It is our highest priority, not just in rhetoric, but also in the amount of dollars that we spend on public safety every day. And what I am so grateful for are the public safety professionals, our police officers, who are working every day, day and night, as you'll see in this plan, who are walking patrols outside in their gear in the blistering heat, who are working on the weekends, late at night and into the morning. They are public servants who are demonstrating a huge amount of personal sacrifice in order to ensure that Cincinnati is safe. And it is. Cincinnati is safe. The downtown OTR areas are safe. But what is very important right now is that they need to be safer. Too many people perceive downtown and OTR as unsafe, and that is very important. We have to continue, as you'll see in this plan, to provide visibility of our police officers in our urban core and to continue to prioritize enforcement of street-level crimes in order to make sure that everyone feels safe and that Cincinnati continues to be a safe city. Our interventions since the beginning of the summer, when we saw these concerning crime trends, particularly in the downtown area, are working. We have seen a stabilization in crime, and in some areas we have seen a significant decrease in crime. However, Cincinnati, again, needs to be safer. And so we will continue these interventions until we are comfortable that the perceptions of safety and the actual data around safety match, which is our ultimate goal. I want to spend a little bit of time reiterating our downtown and OTR safety plan. Spend a little bit of time talking about some of the new announcements, including the curfew that's going into enforcement Friday evening, this coming Friday evening, and take any questions that you have. But first, we'll start with our slide deck. Our downtown safety plan, as I mentioned, started really at the beginning of the summer when we started to see some concerning crime trends that were happening, particularly in the downtown and in the OTR area. I'll talk through our current initiatives, the focus areas, and the next step. Our focus areas, as you all know, have been our hotspot areas, and unfortunately, as we've seen, those hotspot areas have been concentrated in the OTR and downtown area. The banks, OTR, and our urban core downtown continue to be and have been our focus areas since the beginning of the summer. We have deployed new technologies, we have deployed greater visibility in police officers, and we have deployed a new task force to focus on the enforcement of street-level crimes. The current initiatives to review are walking patrols, where police officers are on foot, engaging with the public, engaging with restaurants and business owners. Our roving street crimes task force, which is an enforcement tactics, particularly on street-level crime like gambling, drug use, loud music, etc. We restricted scooter and red bikes earlier in the summer because we saw a concerning trend of their use to effectuate crime. We've also taken traffic enforcement very seriously with road safety enforcement blitzes. We've expanded our FUSIS camera network, having surveillance not just on city cameras but on private cameras, so that the city has a real-time access to those cameras in order to monitor and investigate crime. And then finally, I'll touch on some additional 3CDC investments. We really start with expanded patrols. Visibility for our law enforcement in our urban core has been a top priority for us since the beginning of the summer. And you'll see on this map that we have deployed our police and the visibility tactics, particularly in our urban core where we're seeing some hot spots and concerning crime activity. We'll start from the south and go north. It starts with our implementation of increased bike patrols, in the Fountain Square district. This includes the Fountain Square area as well as several blocks east and west and also south. We have 7 days a week patrol officers on bike going through the area on the evenings, in the afternoons and evenings, 7 days a week. We go further north to the Court Street area. This is an area where we have partnered with the Sheriff's Department. The city is paying for sheriff's deputies to patrol the Court Street area, which is a good synergy with the Sheriff's Department because so many county buildings of which they are responsible for security are in the Court Street area. And Sheriff McGuffey has demonstrated extraordinary leadership in this partnership. So now in the evenings and in the afternoons, during the week, we have an increased presence of sheriff deputies patrolling that area. We move now to Ziegler Park in the afternoons and evenings, 7 days a week. We will have 2 officers. On Monday to Wednesday, we'll have 1 officer there. Again, they are walking and patrolling the park. Vine Street, we have 2 officers 7 days a week in the afternoons and evenings. Again, these are officers on foot, walking patrol, engaging with the community, providing visibility. We have the same thing on Main Street, 2 officers doing the same. And again, we have 1 officer on Washington Park in the afternoons and evenings. On top of the expanded patrols, we are also deploying our street crimes task force in specific areas and also CDRT and SWAT in specific areas. Keep in mind, CDRT and SWAT are our highest trained, most effective police officers in the Cincinnati Police Department. Every single weekend during the summer and throughout the year, we deploy CDRT and SWAT to start at the banks. From the banks, they leave some officers at the banks and they travel north. Now, After the unfortunate fight on 4th Street, one of our responses is increasing their geographic footprint to now also include 4th Street. So CDRT and SWAT on the weekends will leave the banks, leave officers at the banks, go to 4th Street, leave officers there to continue to patrol and increase visibility. Then a cadre of them will go to Fountain Square, again, leaving police officers there, CDRT and SWAT, and then they move their way north to Main Street, where they will do the same thing. In addition to that, we have asked our task force, our street crimes task force, to pay particular attention and target race and liberty, and they are going to be patrolling every 2 hours on the afternoons and evenings all week. Those are the orange arrows, but you can see from the previous slide, the blue arrows or pins are an overlay of both CDRT, SWAT, and the Street Crimes Task Force with the walking patrols for both CPD and also the Sheriff's Department. One last thing I'll say about the banks. We've been meeting consistently with various restaurants at the banks and OTR, and they've provided us positive feedback about our work. One of the most important things that they did with support of the city was create a permit around the door at the banks, which is now 21 and up and no guns, which has been an incredible partnership to allow us to increase public safety, particularly in the banks area. And I do want to take this moment to thank a huge thank you to Chief DG and City Manager Long, who have been working side by side with me all summer long, deploying these strategies, supporting our police officers, and making sure that the public sees the visibility of police officers and the enforcement tactics that they're taking through the Street Crimes Task Force. Which brings us to the task force. I wanted to spend a little bit of time here to better educate the public about what this task force is. It's a new task force that the chief, through her leadership, has impaneled, and she started this task force, as you can see, the week of June 23rd. This task force is staffed by officers from various districts' violent crime squad. They target emerging hotspot crime areas using data, and it's a mixture of undercover assets as well as uniformed police. They are specifically targeting the quality of life crimes that we get so much feedback about in City Hall, and they're specifically prioritizing enforcement. So that includes traffic issues, drug use, loud music, it includes gambling, those kinds of quality of life issues that unfortunately have been persistent, and we are prioritizing enforcement to make sure that we mitigate the damage. As I mentioned earlier on, one of the first implementations that we did the week of June 30th, very early on in the summer, was limit red bike and Lime and Bird scooters. We've geotagged the Lime and Bird scooters to prevent them from being used in or near some parking areas to prevent car break-ins. We were seeing reported from CPD that some of our youth were using the red bikes and the scooters in order to get into parking garages, break into a lot of cars in a short period of time, and then make an exit very quickly using the red bike and the Lime. Remember, car break-ins have a direct tie to gun violence in our community because, as the chief has mentioned, a huge portion of the illegal guns on our streets are on our streets because they were taken from cars. Unfortunately, people are breaking into cars and finding guns at such a successful rate that they're continuing to do it. One thing that the public can help CPD do is leave their guns at home. Or if you're going to bring your gun in your car, please lock it up in a safe or in a gun lock. We are providing free gun locks at our police stations and in some of our rec centers. Please be a responsible gun owner and leave it at home or lock it up. We've restricted those red bike usage and Lime and scooter uses at night from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, and that is specifically targeted in the urban core. The restrictions on red bike and on scooters are not citywide. This is a partnership, particularly in the urban core, with 3CDC, and 3CDC has made significant investments in order to support the work of Chief DG and all of our law enforcement professionals, including our city manager, Cheryl Long. They've invested over $3.7 million in staffing costs. That is over 65 ambassador staff working 24/7 in our urban core. And that's important because these ambassador staff are a friendly face in our community, are culturally competent, help us work on litter and other quality of life issues, and they are a huge asset as we continue to make downtown Cincinnati safer and more welcoming to both residents and also tourists. The 3CDC is also making huge investments to make sure that their parking garages and surface parking lots are as safe as possible. So that's our safety plan today, and as it has evolved and increased over the summer, and taking us to this moment right now. I want to now touch on the enforcement of the curfew, which is starting this Friday. I'm going to touch on some transit center, specifically Government Square Transit Center updates that are important as the school year begins to start, and we are expecting and anticipating some challenges, which we're trying to be proactive about, and also some council action around additional public safety funding. Let's start with the curfew. During the summer session of City Council, following the emergency session of City Council that I called during the summer to start this conversation on curfew for minors, City Council has passed 2 ordinances. The first ordinance changes the existing curfew ordinance from an ordinance that distinguished between age groups, tying it to the hours when they could be out and about. Now it's just one flat curfew citywide, 11 p.m. If you are an unsupervised teen under the age of 18 after 11 p.m., we will have the ability to enforce the curfew anywhere in the city. For the purposes of our immediate acute concerns, however, City Council also passed a second ordinance with a special extended curfew district, targeting, again, prioritizing the urban core, so over the Rhine and the urban core downtown, all the way to the river at the banks with Smale Park. That special extended curfew district is at 9 p.m. So if you are 18, or excuse me, yeah, if you're under the age of 18, you're an unsupervised teen, starting at 9 p.m. in the special extended curfew district, which is OTR all the way to the river, starting on Friday, Cincinnati Police Department, in collaboration with many of our partners, will be enforcing the curfew. For all enforcement, CPD is trained to ask for compliance. If that fails, to tell the person to comply, and if that fails, to demand compliance. That will be the hierarchy of orders for curfew enforcement. Before the police officers get involved, however, we will have collaborative agreement, problem-solving staff interfacing with the kids to get them to comply, and we will also have 311 staff interfacing with the kids to get them to comply. If that fails, CPD will then step in. For kids that are breaking curfew, we have partnered with Seven Hills. We will be taking them on Friday and Saturdays to the curfew center that we have newly created in partnership with Seven Hills. We have 3 hours to get kids back to their home if they're breaking curfew. Oftentimes, kids who are breaking curfew may be in a situation where they don't want to go home or where they do not have a home. In those instances, we're partnering with Lighthouse Youth Services to hand the kids to them and empower them to take care of the children. Speaking frankly, I've been very clear about the curfew. I find it very challenging that we are now in a position where we have to enforce a curfew. All summer, the chief and I have been talking about parental responsibility. We've been pleading and calling for adults in these kids' lives to take a greater interest, to be more engaged, and unfortunately that has fell on deaf ears, and so we are here today. We have taken great pains to implement a curfew enforcement protocol that is fair, that is equitable, and most importantly, does not criminalize children. The point of this is to save kids. We want to prevent them from being victims of crime. And we want to prevent having to create a criminal record on a kid that will follow them for the rest of their lives. We have worked quickly in order to build this back-end infrastructure to take care of our kids. And I'm so proud of City Manager Cheryl Long for leading so effectively to stand up this large operation with so many community partners in such a small amount of time. And I'm grateful for CPD for working with us on equitable enforcement for our children. Next is Government Square. As many of you and the members of the media and many people at home know that in the past we have had challenges with our transit centers, specifically at Government Square, due to a large amount of unsupervised kids congregating in those areas after school. If you recall, we are in this situation because the school board and SORTA decided that they could no longer provide yellow buses to many of the schools in our community, and so CPS students and many other students, not just CPS, were using public transit to get to and from school, which created the unintended consequence of many unsupervised teens congregating in these transit areas. We have been working diligently and proactively to make sure that we have a good plan in place as school is starting to begin, specifically on Government Square. First thing that we've done in tandem with Metro and SORTA is reduce the student pass hours to stop working at 5 p.m. to encourage kids to get home from school as soon as possible. Metro has also implemented restrictions on unnecessary transfers of students to Government Square. A vast majority of the kids can get from school to their home without having to transfer through Government Square. Many of them were choosing to do so to hang out with their friends. We are now putting a limit on where they can transfer to and how they can transfer. One of the hotspot problems was the liquor store that was on Government Square. We worked very diligently to relocate that store from Government Square, and we've repurposed that space and location for a Metro security office that can monitor in real time what's happening at our transit center on Government Square. And in addition to that, we've deployed community outreach workers to directly interact with the youth and provide them resources like after-school activities and also food, because many of these kids are unfortunately food insecure. Council has been an extraordinary partner through the entire summer, working with me on an emergency session, prioritizing public safety during the regular summer session, and very recently on August 6th, passing $2 million more to supplement the city's public safety budget. These dollars will be used to expand the recruit class that we are working hard to implement in order to increase our complement by about 50 well-trained, well-experienced officers who are lateraling into Cincinnati. We're spending a lot of money on police overtime right now. Not just the public safety plan that I've been articulating, but so many other large events that police officers provide details for and traffic for. We've updated our technology with both lighting and more surveillance cameras. And again, 3 CDC ambassadors in downtown and over the Rhine, in addition to the $3.7 million that 3 CDC has put forward, the city is using our resources to supplement that as well. But we can't do this alone. We need engagement. Of course, we need engagement on parents and families, as we talked about with our minors and the curfew enforcement. We also need your help connecting your private surveillance cameras to the city's network. And you can very easily do that to give us more eyes on the streets by going to connectcincinnati.org. Anyone who has a dedicated surveillance camera or security camera can sign up and allow the city to have real-time access to your footage, again, to help us with both investigations and also monitoring crime in real time. And then finally, for non-emergency issues, of course, if there's an emergency going on, please call 911. We cannot fight crime if you are not reporting the crime. So when you see crime happening, please call 911 immediately so that we can respond immediately. For non-emergency crimes, however, we also need your help. So if you see something suspicious, if you see the remnants of a crime, if you see anything that we should know about in order to help us do our job more effectively, please call 513-765-1212. Again, that's 513-765-1212. I really appreciate the media's engagement during during this entire summer, and particularly over the last 3 weeks. We take this issue very seriously. That's why we've been meeting with you every 2 weeks during the summer to update you and the public about our serious interventions. That's why we will continue to do this, to take your questions and empower our citizens with as much information as possible. We take violent crime very seriously. It's our #1 issue here in City Hall. And again, the interventions that we are deploying now and in the future are working to stabilize crime and in some instances to decrease crime, specifically downtown in our urban core. But no one is celebrating. We know that we have more work to do. We take this seriously. And we know that the perception of safety is important, and we know that Cincinnati needs to get safer, and we are deadly serious about making that happen. With that, I'll take your questions. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I crunched the data through yesterday for crime, specifically downtown and over the Rhine. Downtown has seen a dip month over month for the first 11 days of 17%. The year over year is 4.7%. Over the Rhine, for the first month over month and year over year, is up 70%. That's total crime. Most of them are property crimes, burglaries, break-ins to cars, and things like that.
Yeah.
But saying that, you're doing all this, but the rates are still up over last year and still over last month in some of your hotspots. What do you do to make people feel safer?
Continuing to communicate with them about what the reality is and continuing to invest in our public safety resources to make sure that there's both visibility of police officers in our urban core and also to continue to prioritize enforcement, particularly on those crime stats you mentioned. Look, there's no doubt that we continue to have challenges with specific kinds of crimes. Now, when you say just without context what the data is, it's not the full picture. As you just mentioned, most of that crime is property crime, which is why we have been so focused on car break-ins and on burglaries. We have been working diligently. Both the walking patrols and the street crimes task force are specifically targeted to confront those crimes. And as I mentioned, we are not there yet. However, we have seen, particularly month over month, positive progress on a lot of those crimes in downtown and over the Rhine. These interventions are working. They are moving the numbers, and we will continue to double down on them as the summer progresses.
So that's a follow-up. That was going to be my follow-up. So you're still committed, even though the stats may show that it's been slow to have an impact, you're still committed to the tactics and the strategies?
Absolutely. We're committed to these, but we're also committed to adding. As you've seen throughout the entire summer, we did not just put a plan in place and just leave it there. We have been monitoring it every day and making changes and additions, including increased police presence almost every week during the summer, and we will continue to monitor it very closely and provide new interventions as necessary.
Mr. Mayor, in terms of the numbers you said that are trending in the right direction, what are you seeing? What numbers are we seeing? We spoke to a woman in our community conversation on finding solutions to crime, and she says, Commissioner OTR, the patrols there, she says she's lived in OTR for 12 years. They've gotten better now. It's worse than she's ever seen it. She doesn't feel safe. She doesn't feel safe walking along, particularly downtown at night. What do you say to people like her, and what do you say to her?
Yeah, I say I'm sorry. I take public safety very seriously, and public safety is my responsibility. No one else's in the city of Cincinnati. And it is not good enough if our residents who have lived in OTR and downtown do not feel safe, which is why we are continuing to double down on these interventions to make sure that the woman that you spoke to and all people, both residents and tourists coming downtown, see that safety and feel that safety. Look, we focused a lot on crime data throughout the summer. I don't think I've focused enough on reaffirming people's feelings. If you feel unsafe, irrespective of what the data says, that's a problem. That's a problem for me to solve. And that's why we're here and continuing to be here with these interventions. Now, I will say, though, that not everyone shares that feeling. I was downtown this past weekend and downtown in the previous weekend, and the city was full. The city was full because of Red Bull Flugtag downtown. The city was full because of our Queen City Slam Through and Through basketball tournament, because of the sneaker ball at TQL Stadium. I talked to some restaurants and they said they had their best weekend of the year so far last summer. This weekend we have Black Family Reunion. Later in the year we have River Roots, which is the first celebration of the country's 250th anniversary. We continue to host large events downtown, and people continue to come. Now, for those who don't feel safe, that continues to be my priority, and we will continue to take this seriously and essentially only work on this until we fix it.
Mayor,
You talked about the curfew, the students having this 9 p.m. curfew. With school starting, you're not going to have extracurricular activities that are going to run long. Are you working with Cincinnati Public Schools in order to make sure that the students do abide by the curfew, or if not, or will they be given grace and going forward?
Yeah, grace is, particularly with children, is certainly something that we are prioritizing. Now, keep in mind, the 9 p.m. curfew is specifically for the special curfew district, which is OTR, all the way down to the banks of the river. That does include some CPS schools, as you've noted. We have been working not just with CPS, but with so many of our service providers in order to collaborate and put together a plan that is effective but also fair. And so, of course, for after-school activities, for kids who are going to and from work, there are exceptions to the curfew that we will continue to be thoughtful about. But it is also true that for too long, particularly downtown, there have been large groups of unsupervised teens that are engaging in disorderly conduct, and we have to put a stop to that.
Mayor, I'd like to ask a quick question. Is it, with the incident that happened on the 26th of 4th and Elm involving adults, and there are obviously a million questions people will have, and we'll keep asking when will more video be released and all the things. Feel free to weigh in on that if you'd like. But my question to you is, as a mayor, is it frustrating to think that you have adults engaging in this kind of behavior, however it all went down, whoever's to blame, etc., and young people are heavily involved in social media. I'm sure they're seeing this and sharing it and going, oh my gosh, look at this, and how they react. And then they might find some poor word choice inspiration to maybe do similar activities and get the attention. Is that been on your mind to a degree, and is that something you're worried about?
There is a lack of a culture of personal responsibility, whether that's adults or children. And not to touch on any one specific instance, but you've heard us talk about personal responsibility from the very beginning of the summer. I cannot, because of state law, it is impossible for me to mandate that gun owners be responsible. It's very hard for CPD to be on every single street corner. So there is a level of personal responsibility that has to take place, and that culture change is important. However, that is not an excuse for the perception of safety being what it is today. And so I am taking control and ownership over everything I can possibly do to address that problem.
Mayor, you talked about not only the realities of crime and public safety in the city, specifically downtown and OTR, but as well as the perception of that. Obviously we've been seeing some troubling trends in those neighborhoods, but at the same time, thinking back to several years ago, at the height of the pandemic, violent crime was worse citywide.
Yep.
I think what's different now is we have sort of national figures weighing in on this and bringing attention to it. Can you touch on how that's sort of affecting people's perception of crime in the city?
Yeah, I mean, again, outside, we are focused on downtown over the Rhine for good reason. But when you look at citywide crime data, it is down year over year. In fact, shootings are down over 25%. I understand why people don't want to hear me say that, because the perception of safety, particularly in the urban core, and the stats, particularly in the urban core, do not reflect that. It's very difficult to control public perception, and so that is just a fact. I'm in no way blaming public perception or using public perception as an excuse. I'm just simply stating that public perception is what it is, and it's my job to address public perception as well as address the reality of crime on our streets. And right now, perception does in some instances match the reality of some of our crimes, particularly our property crimes, being in a place where it is on the rise. Now, the interventions that we have been putting in place, like police visibility and the task force, has stabilized those numbers and in some instances driven them down. But until we are able to match public perception with the reality on the ground, it's my job as an elected leader who serves at the discretion of the citizens of Cincinnati to continue to prioritize that so people feel it as well as believe it.
I've seen you post pictures following the patrols in Cincinnati or in OTR some nights. Can you share, any firsthand experiences of direct impacts you've seen from those patrols?
Yeah, I've talked to when I've been on patrol a few times this summer, both on Main Street and on Vine Street, and also with CDRT and SWAT at the banks. And it makes a real difference. It makes a real difference for people who are patronizing our restaurants downtown, but it also makes a real difference for the property owners, the residents, and the business owners who I have a chance to talk to every time I'm out and about. And they're appreciative, and so am I. Walking with all of that police gear in 90-degree weather in the evenings and afternoons, 7 days a week, is hard work. And I'm so grateful for the sacrifice and the commitment of public service of those police officers who are doing those patrols. But people just, it makes people feel safer when they see a police officer walking around. It has a huge perception impact, but it also has a really important deterrent effect because of its visibility. And so we will continue those walking patrols and consider future walking patrols as needed later on in the summer.
Mr. Mayor, about the curfew.
One second. One second, James. Go ahead.
I understand that when the teens go to the lighthouse, it's a voluntary option, and they don't have to stay there to be released. What's going to prevent them from going back out and being out violating the policy?
Yeah, in that situation, obviously, we will have the discretion to take more stringent action, including potentially having to take them to 2020 and the juvenile detention center. But that is certainly not our goal. We are confident that we will be able to make these interventions in a way that is actually helpful for the children and not in a way that is punitive.
That was going to be the process of the curfew. So you're asked, a police officer asks, then tells, then demands.
James, if I could interrupt. So first, 311 staff and collaborative problem-solving adults and staff will interact with the kids, and then police will come in and do the hierarchy of ask, tell, and demand.
And after demand, they say no. Are they escorted to a
Yep,
squad car and taken?
they are then detained by police officers and taken to the curfew center.
Does that include handcuffing, all of that?
That's a good question for the chief.
Okay.
Question about the curfew, and then question again about downtown. Particularly with curfew, how do you kind of get to it? How do you ensure that it's not punitive or it's similar to detention for these young people? They don't feel that way.
Yeah, well, that's why we did the hard work of partnering very quickly with Seven Hills. So they're not being taken directly to the 2020 detention center, so that it is a, for lack of a better term, softer landing, more welcoming environment. Because what we want to communicate to the kids is, look, these are the rules, and we want you to follow the rules, and we're giving you an opportunity to follow the rules so that we can keep you safe.
Again, perception is a big talker. When it comes to, you mentioned the patronizing businesses during events, outside of events, daily life of people, going about their day, work, school, all the other things, they're not seeing what their perception is showing up in behavior. We talked to residents, we walked with residents, we saw that during lunchtime today on Vine Street, certain restaurants are empty, not as full as they were probably a year ago. Is there a concern there too, or about business, and what is your message to those business owners?
Yeah, of course. That's why I've been regularly meeting with the Restaurant Association and various restaurants in the urban core. Of course, the sanctity and dignity of life is our priority, preserving that, both preventing deaths and also preventing injuries. But there's no doubt that there is an economic reality where if the perception of safety gets to a place where people just refuse to come downtown, that's obviously a concern. Now, I don't think we're anywhere near that. I don't think the reality of the truth on the ground reflects that. But of course, that is something we're keeping in mind, and part of the reason why we're acting so forcefully.
Why do you think there has been this increase of the property crimes, like car break-ins and things like that? You talked about a culture of personal responsibility, or do you think there's a deeper issue of poverty?
Well, poverty is the root cause of all of these challenges, but specifically the car break-ins and the property crime is about guns. It's about guns, period. When I first came into office, we had a real challenge in Cincinnati and across the country of Kias and Hyundais getting broken into because of viral TikTok videos showing kids how to do it. As a result, we had, as you reported, a spate of car break-ins, particularly on Hyundais and Kias. What we believe happened was those kids saw that a lot of these cars have guns in them. And oftentimes, the guns were more valuable than actually stealing the car. And so it evolved from just Kias and Hyundais to all cars. And so as you've seen through the years, those car break-in numbers have unfortunately increased. The MO on the crime here is someone will look for unlocked cars, go into a parking garage or in a parking lot, try a bunch of car doors and see which ones are unlocked. For the ones that are unlocked, they break in, look for a gun. If they don't find one, they don't steal anything else, they just move on to the next car. If they can't find a gun or if they can't find a car that's open, that's when they start breaking into multiple cars, specifically looking for guns. And that is part of the problem for why there's so many illegal guns in our community. So we will take all the steps that I've talked about. In addition to that, the city manager and Councilmember Anna Albee are working on a program with the chief of police to provide support, but also grades for parking garages and surface parking lots downtown to better communicate to the public which owners have taken steps to protect those areas and which haven't. That includes lighting, it includes cameras that are connected to our fuses, that includes staff, that includes a gate that opens and closes to make sure that they're monitoring that activity as well. In addition to that, we've deployed our street crimes task force to target and prioritize car break-ins. It's still a challenge, and it's still a challenge partly because it has been successful in these folks getting access to guns. So again, I want to reiterate, what would help us and help CPD is if people left their guns at home.
You said earlier you're going to work until this is solved. How long will this take? What point are you satisfied with the safety in our city?
You know, it's a confluence of factors. Of course, first and foremost we look at the data, telling us where interventions are successful, where they're not as successful, and where we need to change things up. But data is just one part of it. The other part of it is how people are feeling. And in addition to getting feedback through phone calls and emails, etc., having conversations with people on the ground, which I've been doing consistently, not just business owners but residents, people who are hanging out outside of their building because they don't have central AC, getting their perspective on whether these interventions are working or not. So it's a confluence of factors. I can't give you a specific timeline, but I can commit to you that we will not stop until we have improved public safety and made people feel more comfortable. Becca.
Are there details on these contracts with Lighthouse and Seven Hills? How much will that cost and the length of the contract, and where's the money coming from?
Yeah, we can get all of that information to you.
I didn't see anything on there about the Ohio State Patrol troopers.
Mhm.
Are they already coming? I know you're running street crime task force. Are they focusing on traffic violations as well? I know that's something that they would have taken over. When are they starting?
Yeah, so the chief just met with the director of public safety on behalf of the governor. They just met, I think, 2 days ago, and are working diligently to roll out the highway patrol patrolling our highways to relieve CPD officers who can be deployed into our urban core for visibility and enforcement efforts. I don't have a timeline for you right now. I can ask the chief to update you. However, I do know that she's been working diligently with the governor's office, and we hope to roll that out soon.
Mayor, real quick, a final question for me. I'm just struck by the release of the body camera footage related to the Elm and Fourth situation late on Friday. It seemed to me, and I didn't do the story, but I was next to the colleague who did, and it seemed to run counter to this national narrative that police really weren't that engaged. Clearly, they were trying to figure out what happened. They offered help from fire if anybody needed it multiple times. So, the release of that may have calmed some waters, I guess, if that's the phrase. There's also now this narrative about this. There's video out there showing really how this situation started that precedes the video that many of us have been able to publicly share based on copyright issues and the like. Would you like that to be out there sooner than later, or when can we expect maybe seeing a little more video if it exists?
Yeah, the investigation is incredibly important to get this right. And as we've said, really from the beginning of that incident, in order to combat misinformation and rumors, the investigation has to be given the appropriate amount of time to understand what happened and to bring charges and arrests. I want to thank the investigators. I want to thank CPD. These folks have been working around the clock since the fight happened, and we've seen 7 arrests. They have acted quickly. They have enforced justice, and they're not finished yet. As I have said this week, I understand the frustration from the community about not being briefed on the facts that we know right now. Again, it's important to give the investigators time and space in order to do their job. But I do think, as I've said previously, that we need to make final charging decisions as soon as possible, and we need to update the public as soon as possible. And the chief and sure will agree. But again, it's a balancing act between allowing our investigators enough time to do their job while also making sure that we're updating the public. Now, this is something that is important to reiterate, that because we haven't been able to fully brief the public, it has left room for rumors and misinformation. I think what is in the best interest of the city is for us to, as soon as possible, make final charging decisions and brief the public so that we can move on from this fight and focus on the real public safety concerns, which are gun violence and property crime.
Mayor, now I'm not sure if you would know anything about this, because we just got news of this while this press conference was going on. There's kind of a federal charge filed against one of the men indicted in the fight. Can you speak a little bit to the federal involvement in this? I know there was some talk, or Senator Moreno had talked about the FBI getting involved in this investigation. Can you talk at all about whether there's been cooperation between CPD and the feds, and what that
Yeah.
looks like?
We have extraordinary partnerships with federal agencies. In fact, we were the first city in the state to start a crime gun intelligence unit, which is a joint venture and partnership between CPD, our solicitors, prosecutor's office, and ATF and the FBI. They're using shell casings and other DNA evidence in order to connect illegal guns to several different crimes, and it has been extraordinarily successful. So successful that Columbus and Cleveland have now started their own, what we call CJIC. It's not unusual for us to partner with our federal agencies in fighting against violent crime, and I can say that the partnership is strong. I can't speak to the specific details of this investigation because that's being led by CPD, but I'd refer you for specific answers to the chief on that.
You had previously said that when it comes to charges, anybody that laid hands on anybody else should be charged. From what we've seen, that hasn't happened yet. What's your perspective on that? And where do you think that's going to go?
The investigation's not over. I think it makes sense for the investigators to focus on the most violent crimes that happened, which is what they have focused on. Obviously, the injuries were horrific. The entire fight was completely unacceptable. We cannot have drunk people getting into a street fight at 3 a.m. We have to make that very clear to everyone and hold those accountable. I will continue to say that anyone who engaged in violence during that fight should be investigated and charged and held accountable. I do not have all the facts, however. The investigators do. And I trust them to do their job. They are independent. They're going to make charges or not make charges. And once they do that based on the full access to the evidence that only they have and brief the public, I'll then be able to give a more specific position. But as it sits right now, based on what I know right now, which is not everything, I do believe everyone who engaged in violence should be charged.
Can you provide clarity in our previous conversation? Residents were under the impression that that the help was totally denied from the state, others weren't sure what help was received. Can you clarify for our viewers?
Yeah.
What aid is being used or taken from the state?
Yeah, we are working with the governor's office, and so grateful to the governor for this important partnership on having Highway Patrol our highways for traffic enforcement, freeing up CPD resources to be reinvested in our urban core for visibility and enforcement. We're working with the governor on using Highway Patrol aerial surveillance in order to support specifically our street crimes task force on enforcement of quality of life crimes. And we're also partnering with them on parole violations to make sure that we're holding those folks accountable.
And there are some things there, and just to clarify on that, that's a good question, because people are like, why wouldn't you take the full panoply of help? But there's some issues involving maybe police union type. We're seeing this play out in DC. I'm learning about this with the National Guard on the streets there. There are union issues relative to the Metropolitan Police Force. I imagine that may be the case here. Certain levels of training or knowing about how the collaborative works here. Just help people understand if that's the case. Why wouldn't you take everything?
There's a lot in that question. What I will say very simply is that the Cincinnati Police Department is the best police department in the country. We invest a lot of resources into their training, into their salary, into their benefits. And CPD is responsible for policing Cincinnati, and CPD has it. We are very grateful for the governor for his support in those specific areas. As the summer progresses and as the facts on the ground change, we may decide to engage in other strategies in partnership with the governor, but the chief, myself, and Cheryl are very confident and comfortable with the current partnership and it being actually helpful in the specific crimes where we need help.
I'm sure we have the answer to this, but do you know what percentage of businesses or residents downtown in those hotspot areas are registered through FUSIS, and specifically 3CDC? Have they registered?
Yeah, all 3 CDC cameras are on FUSIS. It's hard for me to say what percentage of the rest of city cameras in the downtown area are, but if we have that information, I'll send it to you. Just one more question, guys. All right, have a great weekend. Thank you so much.